Bears are one of the most dangerous animals in the wild. So much so that there is lots of advice out there telling people how best to avoid them and what to do if one should ever get close to them. Thankfully, not every bear wants to harm people, and some are simply curious as to who or what we are. Here are a few bear encounters which are a bit more on the friendly and lighthearted side of things. Wild bear cub runs towards golfer. When out playing a game of golf, the last thing you expect to see is a baby bear heading towards you across the green. But this is exactly what happened to one man back in 2018. It started off as a pretty typical day for the golfers, who were happily enjoying their game in the beautiful afternoon sun. Then one of the men noticed a tiny brown spot in the distance, and it seemed to be getting closer. Confused as to what it could be, one of the golfers got their phone out and recorded this strange encounter. As the spot got closer, the men were able to see it was actually a bear cub. Unfortunately, unbothered by interrupting a game, the bear continued to approach the men, not hesitating or turning around even once. But instead of running away from the small animal, which could have still done some serious damage, the two men stood still as to not frighten the young creature. Some advice states that if you stand still when a bear is near, it will lose interest in you and walk away. But this wasn't the case for this curious cub. Instead, it approached one of the golfers and started sniffing him. Then it stood up on its hind legs and looked the man in the face. Holding his breath, the golfer prepared for the worst, but it seemed that the cub had a different idea. It slowly walked forward and gave the man a big bear hug. Stunned at what was happening, the shocked golfer stayed completely still as to not frighten the bear off. Once satisfied with its hug, the bear let go and walked back the way he came, probably to return to one very worried mama bear. Even though this was such a unique and lucky situation, you should never try to approach a baby bear in the wild, as usually their mothers are close by and are extremely protective over their young. It's not every day that you can claim to have had a real bear hug. Usually, encounters with these wild animals end a bit more like this next story. Man asks bear family to leave his yard. Bears can be quite curious creatures and sometimes end up in places they shouldn't be. Like this one family of bears in Canada. In 2017, Jordan Cote was getting ready to leave for work when he heard his tenant's dog barking outside on the porch. Wondering what was wrong, Jordan walked out onto his deck, only to find a mama bear and her two cubs just meters away from him. I didn't even realize what was going on until I walked around the corner and the two cubs were attached to the mama bear's leg, he said. Not wanting to cause an incident, the shocked man put the dog back into the house and then returned to film the bears. By this time, the animals had noticed him, but didn't seem to care all that much. Eventually, though, Jordan had to leave for work, but he didn't want to leave the wild creatures wandering in his yard without him being there. That's when he did the most Canadian thing ever. He politely asked the bears to leave. As if the mama bear understood him, she gathered her cubs and ushered them off of the property. "Thank you," Jordan can be heard saying in the video.
Thank you.
"Hope you enjoyed my yard. Have a good day." Surprisingly, in the 2 years that the man has been living in his home, this was the first time he had seen bears in his yard. And though he was shocked at how calm the mother stayed, it was also thanks to how peacefully he handled the situation as well. How cool is that? Though only a Canadian could politely ask a wild animal to leave and have it actually work. Though this next bear wasn't as camera shy as that family. Fishing bear gets close to photographers. Salmon season is a huge feeding time for bears, and dozens of them can often be found fishing the rivers for their next meal. Such a spectacle, of course, brings people who want to see and document it for themselves, like these photographers who had an amazing close encounter with one of these animals. It happened back in 2018 at the McNeil River State Game Sanctuary. Photographer Ian Stotesbury and a few of his friends had set up on a hill overlooking the river, hoping to catch some beautiful pictures of the Alaskan brown bears fishing. Only they got more than they bargained for. Up to 100 wild bears, including cubs, showed up to feed, Ian said. Bears and other wildlife are able to live a life that is not influenced by human activity. McNeil River is a remote spot that is only accessed by plane, and because of the strict policies, only allowing few humans to see it, the wildlife there flourishes. But because of this lack of human interaction, one brown bear got curious about these new visitors. The 1,000-pound, 8-foot animal, tired from fishing, sauntered over to the group of photographers and got within a few feet of them. Awestruck at the bear's bravery, The group of people stood incredibly still so that they didn't accidentally make the bear feel threatened. After checking out the group, the animals soon grew bored and wandered away again, leaving the group of people with racing hearts and an experience that will last them a lifetime. The McNeil River area was designated a wildlife sanctuary in 1967, and then expanded in 1993 to protect the world's largest concentration of wild brown bears. What a once-in-a-lifetime experience! Although I don't think I'd want to get that close to a wild grizzly, unlike this next man who seems to have made friends with one. Mama bear brings cubs to meet her human friend. Usually when it comes to mama bears and their cubs, they will stay well away from anything or anyone that could possibly harm them. But not this mother. In 2017 in Asheville, North Carolina, a man called Patrick Connolly had an amazing surprise when a female bear who had been visiting him for quite some time decided to bring her newborn cubs along to say hello. The animal, who Patrick had named Simone, walked out of the nearby woods followed closely by her two young babies. Shocked at what he was seeing, Patrick couldn't believe it when Simone brought her cubs right up onto his porch to introduce them to each other. Because of how familiar the man and the female bear had gotten with each other, he said seeing the cubs was like seeing a new member of his own family. After chilling out on the porch for a little while, the young family made their way back down onto the yard and explored the nearby neighborhood. The two cubs even tried to climb a tree before their mother coaxed them down from it. Finally, satisfied with their trip, all three animals returned to the woods where they had emerged from. Patrick said Simone looked well-fed and her cubs seemed very healthy. He looked forward to the family returning, which they did, and enjoyed seeing all the animals grow up and mature even more. What an adorable little family. Patrick is truly lucky to have made a friend like Simone. But sometimes making friends is more difficult than it seems, as this one bear discovered in this next story. Bear sits next to fisherman. We're back in Alaska's McNeil River State Game Sanctuary now, where every year the largest gathering of brown bears in the world occurs. Between June and August, the animals arrive at the river in order to fish for salmon, a key staple of their diet. Human access to the park is limited, as it requires a helicopter ride to reach this specific location. But every year, a handful of lucky visitors are allowed to go and photograph the amazing spectacle of the bear congregation. One year, a photographer named Drew Hamilton was lucky enough to be one of these people. But the experience he was about to have was one that he was definitely not expecting. Whilst sitting in his camping chair by the side of the river, a large brown bear wandered up and sat down next to him. Stunned at what had happened, Drew quietly sat in his chair and observed the calm bear, curious as to what he would do next. The giant animal didn't seem all too bothered about his newfound companion and enjoyed a nice relaxing moment watching the river run by. But he did give Drew a bit of a scare when he stood up to move. Worried the bear was getting a bit too close for comfort, the photographer quickly stood up and started making loud noises to try to scare the bear from coming any closer. Whilst the animal might not have been too afraid of the man's attempts, in fact, it seemed rather confused and a bit annoyed in all honesty. Drew did manage to convince the creature to move along. The bear then proceeded to rejoin the other animals down in the river to catch himself some dinner. Whilst for some, this might be too close an encounter, but one thing's for sure, no one else can say they sat calmly next to a wild grizzly in a moment of pure peace. Whilst these stories might make it seem like bears can be friendly and cuddly creatures, it's always important to remember that they are still wild animals and can be very dangerous. If you see one in the wild, never try to approach it, as it could end extremely bad for you. If you liked this video, why not check out some others over on my channel? And don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to keep up to date with more inspiring stories.